All right, we're going to officially start our program, and I want to welcome everyone to Revolution Books and salute you for braving the frigid climes to be part of this very important program with Carl Dix, entitled Why Defunding the Police and Abolishing the Prisons Under This System is a Dangerous Illusion, especially at a time when the revolution to overthrow the whole damn system has become more possible. So again, I want to welcome you to Revolution Books. My name is Raymond Lauda. I'm a political economist, an advocate for the new communism developed by Bob Avakian, and a spokesperson for Revolution Books. And here you are at this bookstore. I see some familiar faces, some new faces, and we're all going to warm each other up here at Revolution Books today. And this is a very unique bookstore. This is where you find the books, the discussion and debate, and the whole robust atmosphere to understand why the world is the horror that it is and how it can be transformed, radically transformed through revolution. And we like to say that here at Revolution Books, critical thinking and the search for the truth meet the poetic spirit. And the beating heart of this bookstore is the work and leadership of Bob Avakian. His writings are here on the walls. There are tables. Bob Avakian is the most important political thinker and leader in the world today, and it behooves all of us to find out about his work and leadership and to dig into it. And his work and leadership are the beating heart of this bookstore because he has developed the scientific method and approach and the strategy to make a revolution, to actually overthrow this system and to bring into being. He's developed the vision and the blueprint to bring into being a society and world in which human beings can truly flourish. We can go to work in uprooting the racism, the patriarchy, and protect this planet and create a society and world in which human beings can indeed flourish. So again, welcome to Revolution Books. And tonight's program features Carl Dix. And let me tell you something about Carl Dix. Carl Dix is a longtime revolutionary. He is a follower of the revolutionary leader, Bob Avakian. He is the co-initiator with Cornel West of Stop Mass Incarceration. And for those of you who haven't encountered Carl before, his history is one that you should know about. He was part of the first mass refusal of GIs to refuse orders to go to Vietnam in 1970. This was the Fort Dix 6. And for his defiance, his conscience, and his internationalist stand, he was sentenced to prison at Leavenworth Military. This was the Leavenworth Military Prison, and it is there that he became a revolutionary. So you are in the presence of someone who has been, as I said, a revolutionary for many years and who is going to talk to us about this very critical topic. And this is an urgent subject at an urgent time. You know, early this week, a few days ago, was the beginning of Black History Month, February 1st. What happened on February 1st? It was the funeral of Tyree Nichols, gunned down by these slaughtering pigs. February 1st, the first day of Black History Month, and the College Board caved in to the demands of these white supremacist fascist politicians that they eviscerate the heart out of the curriculum for black studies, for advanced placement in high schools throughout the country. They obliterated Black Lives Matter from that curriculum. Reparations. They removed James Baldwin from the reading list. This is the reality of America. This is 2023. Enough. And with that, we're going to begin with a clip from the Revolution Nothing Less show, and then I'm going to hand the stage over to Carl Dix. So again, thank you for coming out, and I look forward to this exciting program.
To further set the stage, Sansara, for the rest of the show and for Black History Month, we're going to play the introduction to Bob Avakian's article, Racial Oppression Can Be Ended, but Not Under This System. This was illustrated by the RNL team. And after we play that, we're going to go to my conversation with Noche Diaz about the murder of Tyre Nichols.
Why is this terror and murder necessary for this system in order to ensure its order and its ongoing functioning? The answer is that from the beginning of this country, white supremacy has been poured into the foundation and built into the institutions and the ongoing functioning of this system. Specifically with regard to black people, the centuries of oppression they have suffered, from slavery days to the days of Jim Crow segregation and Ku Klux Klan terror, to the present time with the continuing systematic discrimination against black people in every part of society, employment, housing, education, healthcare, and on and on. All this has resulted in a situation where masses of black people today, and in particular youth, have been robbed of a means for a decent life, with many maintained in conditions of desperate poverty and deprivation. This, again, is not simply because those who are in the seats of power and deciding government policy are racist, though that is true of most of them. It is fundamentally because of the nature of the system itself and the historically evolved requirements and dynamics of this system of capitalism imperialism. Now that is a big mouthful. The nature of the system itself and the historically evolved requirements and dynamics of this system of capitalism imperialism. So let's break it down. This country was founded on the enslavement of masses of African people, as well as the genocidal subjugation of Native Americans and theft of their land. And its further development involved the conquest of huge parts of Mexico, reducing people of Mexican origin to second-class status as well. This required the propagation of racism to justify all the horrific oppression. Then, when the Civil War broke out over the question of slavery, and even when slavery was abolished as a result of that Civil War, given that white supremacy had been and remained such a crucial part of the glue holding the country together, the only way to put it back together on the foundation of the capitalist system was to once again forcefully assert white supremacy. That is why, very soon after the end of the Civil War, black people were subjected to the system of Jim Crow segregation, backed up by systematic terror punctuated by repeated lynchings, while the genocidal aggression against and theft of the land of Native Americans was stepped up, and immigrants from Mexico were subjected to ongoing discrimination and violence by the enforcers of this system.
Police have released that video showing officers beating Tyre Nichols. The The video is every bit as horrific as Memphis officials had warned it would be. Body camera footage and video from surveillance cameras from January 7th show officers hitting, kicking, and pepper spraying Tyree Nichols. In the video, 29-year-old Tyree Nichols can be heard calling out for his mother. Nichols was hospitalized and then died 3 days later.
In that video, you can see he was already on the ground after he was pulled over at that other location. The officers in the video repeatedly punch and kick Nichols over and over again in the video. At one point, you can see they stand him up, they hold his hands behind his back and begin punching and hitting him and wrestle him down to the ground again.
Tyree Nichols was a loving father to his 4-year-old son. He was the youngest of 4 children, the baby of his family. He worked for Federal Express, but he lived for his passions, skateboarding, photography, and beautiful sunsets. He was an inspiration to those who knew him, and I will let those who loved him most tell you in their own words.
He didn't have a negative bone in his body, like at all. Energetic, outgoing, funny, goofy, always had a smile on his face.
My son, I know everybody say mothers say they had a good son, everybody's son is good, but my son, he actually was a good boy. He had my name tattooed on his arm, and that made me proud, because most kids don't put their mom's name, but he did. My son was a beautiful soul, and he touched everyone.
Tyree brought something out of me to make me feel like, hey, you don't have to do that. You don't have to follow a trend to be loved. You can be yourself. You can skateboard, you can ice hockey, you can do whatever that you want to do.
He was the kind of guy when you come in the door, you can't walk past him without getting a hug.
With a bad concussion, plus you hit 4 times, but it hit your spine. Paralyzed way down, then you wheelchair bound. Never mind that now, you ready to be alive.
In a recent article titled "America, Truly a Model of Depraved Racist Genocide," the revolutionary leader Bob Avakian asked the question, how can any decent person deny that we need a revolution to overthrow this system? Keep that question in mind. At the funeral of Tyree Nichols, his loved ones and friends talked about how much it pained them to be burying him. His mother spoke of how it tore her apart to hear Tyree calling out for her as those pigs savagely beat him, and she was unable to do anything to save him. Many of them also spoke about the kind of person Tyree was. A loving father, a skateboarder, a photographer who loved to take pictures of the sun setting. They all described him as a beautiful human being. But when those pigs stopped him on his way home from the late shift at FedEx and yanked him out of his car, they didn't see his humanity or his beauty. They only saw a young black man driving his car late at night through the high crime area that the Scorpion unit that they were part of had been formed to get under control. They refused to answer Tyree when he asked them, "What did I do wrong? What did I do wrong?" Instead, they cursed at him, beat him, and tased him. Then when Tyree got away from them and ran towards his mother's house, they chased him down, caught him, and began to beat him even more savagely, kicking him in the head,
hitting him with batons, standing him up to get a good shot at him, and then leaving him laying on the ground. They and the MTAs who were sent to do something about his many injuries just let Tyree lay there for far too long. Now, this Scorpion unit that I mentioned was launched to deal with reckless driving and violent crime. The police chief, the black woman police chief, who launched it, bragged about the aggressive approach it was going to take to reckless driving. No more writing traffic tickets. Seize their car. Make them have to walk for 3-4 days, even if they get it back. And the officials in Memphis saw this unit as the centerpiece of their crime-fighting strategy, targeting violent crime. We saw what this came down to when those pigs set upon Tyree on that night. See, and this was anguish piled on top of anguish, and outrage on top of outrage. Seeing this foul murder and knowing that what happened to Tyree that night happens to so many black and brown people again and again. The same week that Tyree was murdered, the LAPD murdered 3 men whose loved ones had called them to help these men deal with mental crises they were going through. One of the women who called 911 told the dispatcher this: "Don't kill him. He just needs help." Now think about what it fucking means that somebody calls 911 and feels like they have to say, "Don't kill him." What does this say about the frontline enforcers for this system? And what does it say about the system that has frontline enforcers like that? And it says even more that when those pigs came, they killed him anyway. A story just broke the other day from Southern California about cops gunning down Anthony Lowe. Anthony Lowe was a double amputee. Both of his legs had been amputated. He was trying to get away from the cops, trying to run away from them, and they shot him down, claiming they felt he was a threat to their lives and other people's lives. And before that, there was George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Philando Castillo, Eric Garner, Michael Brown, Ayanna Stanley Jones, Anthony Baez, Malcolm Ferguson, Nicholas Hayward Jr., and I could go on and on. A question we got to ask is, how long will this go on? Which takes us to another question. How long will we allow this shit to keep going down? How long will we put up with this shit? Got another video clip here from Bob Avakian's interview. Up close and personal with Bob Avakian, Heart and Soul and Hardcore for Revolution. I believe we've got it queued up, and we're going to run that for you right now.
There were millions of people in the street. What was missing then, and we have to fault ourselves in part for this, although we talked about revolution and put out revolution, we didn't really go and struggle with people about, what this really shows is the need to get rid of the whole system. And you are not going to defund the police. Look at what's happened. You got, the great Democratic hero, Joe Biden. The answer is not to defund the police, it's to fund them, fund them, fund them. What'd I say? Fund them. But that was a prevailing line. And so, this thing got led off into a side stream and a side street and didn't go anywhere ultimately, even though it was a, really heroic outpouring of millions of people, which was supported by millions more around the world. Who predicted that a month before? I mean, yes, we've been talking for decades and mobilizing people in struggle against police murder for decades. You know, there's a whole national day of protest against police brutality and criminalization of a generation and repression. That goes back to the mid-90s. You know, but all of a sudden, a bunch of things came together. All right, you know, if the revolutionaries had been working the way we should have been, bringing revolution to that and struggling with people, not just about we need revolution in the abstract, but why these other avenues and lines and roads and programs were not going to lead things where they need to go. The question is, why should anybody put up with this kind of, you know, brutal murder time after time after time after time? Why do the parents and loved ones of these people have to shed these tears and cry this anguish time after time after time? Isn't it long past time to put an end to this completely?
Yep.
Okay, so then what is going to be required to put an end to this and all the other outrages, which we also need to be bringing sharply to light? You know, the oppression of women, the absolute destruction of the environment, the threat of nuclear war going on, the persecution of the immigrants, and on and on and on. You know, the persecution of gay people and, you know, trans people and so on. You know, in the context of all that, we needed to be saying to people, there's only one solution to this. It's not an easy solution, but it's the only real solution. That's what a scientific approach tells us, because this is rooted in the system and we can show it. And the only way to get rid of all this is to overthrow this system.
I want to underscore what Bob Avakian had to say there. These horrors will keep going on until we make a revolution and get rid of the system that's responsible for them. Both the horrors of police murders of black and brown people and the many other horrors being enforced on people in this country and around the world. And when we say revolution, we mean a real revolution, one that mobilizes millions of people to rise up and overthrow this capitalist imperialist system, to defeat and dismantle its institutions of violent suppression and create new revolutionary institutions that will make possible and back people up in carrying out radical emancipating changes and lead them to go on to build a totally different and far better system in place of this messed up one. And the second question that I ask, how long will we allow this to keep going on? That's a challenge. It's a challenge to everybody who hates the fact that this kind of wanton brutality and murder happens again and again and again. Do you hate it enough to get serious about acting to end it? To get with the movement for a real revolution that is working on getting ready and in position to end it in the only way that's really possible, and that's through a real revolution. And this movement needs you and people like you to join it in doing that. Now, this revolution, it ain't no pipe dream. We got leadership for it in Bob Avakian, a revolutionary leader who worked with the Black Panther Party back in the day, and who's deeply analyzed this blood-sucking capitalist system that we're up against, and analyzed the experience of previous revolutions. And on that basis has developed a new framework for human emancipation, the new communism. Bob Avakian is the most important political thinker and leader on the planet today. He's developed a strategy for making revolution in a country like this. He's laid out a roadmap for carrying that strategy out, and he's developed a vision of the new world that this revolution could bring into being. And that vision is in this document, the Constitution for a Future Socialist Republic in North America. And this is something that people need to check out if they've had it with the conditions and the misery and brutality of life today for people under this system. This is a way the world could be, and it's laid out right here. You can also find it on the website revcom.us, and you can find it right here today at Revolution Books. And this revolution I'm talking about ain't something that might happen way off in the far off future. Today, with the fierce infighting going on at the top of the system and the deep splits that run throughout society, revolution has become more possible. And this is something I'll come back to a bit later and sketch out more. Now, whenever these outrageous murders by the police get dragged into the light of day, the authorities take us through a kind of a song and dance. They throw out things they say would deal with this problem. And, you know, I've been around a while. I've been dealing with this for 50 years. That's 5 decades. Man. They said more black elected officials, more black police chiefs. That will do something about this. Then they told us, hey, if you get civilian complaint review boards, then you'd be able to file complaints against the police, get some of them punished, and that would restrain brutal murdering cops. Then they said, well, we can pass some laws and change some policies, and that'll help do something with this. Or we can get better training for the police. These are the kind of things that'll deal with this. Well, the police continued to murder people all the goddamn time. Then, in 2020, after the beautiful uprising in the wake of the police murder of George Floyd, they said, we're going to put body cameras on all these police.
Right. Look at that.
So you could see what they do. And that'll make them, you know, the ones who carry out brutality, that'll restrain them. That'll keep them from doing any bad shit. And then the Democrats also put forward a reform policing bill in Congress. They even named it after George Floyd. They said that would do something about the way these pigs wantonly brutalize and murder black people. That bill, by the way, never got passed because the fascist Republican Party blocked it. But even the stuff that did get passed, what did it do? Well, look, none of this did anything to stop brutal murdering pigs. And Memphis is a laboratory of that because they had just about everything in this. Black police, Memphis police force is majority black. The pigs who carried out this savage murder, at least the brunt of it, those were all black. The police chief was a black woman. These cops had on body cams. And what it meant was we got several different angles to watch the savagery that was unleashed on Tyree Nichols. Memphis also has a law that says that any cop who sees another cop abusing people is bound by law to intervene to stop it. And then all these pigs had gone through kind of training that they do, not just regular training, but an enhanced level of training. And these pigs still brazenly and wantonly murdered Tyree. The cops who murdered him were black, but when they put on that pig uniform, they were signing up to an institution that plays a certain role in society. And I need a copy of Basics. I realized I didn't bring my copy. Can someone? I don't. My Spanish translation is not very good. Yes, that's it right there. I want this copy of Basics because in it, Bob Avakian talks about the role of the police. And
124. 124.
Okay, that was 224. All right, that's what was throwing me off. Here's what Avakian says about the role of the police. The role of the police is not to serve and protect the people. It is to serve and protect the system that rules over the people, to enforce the relations of exploitation and oppression, the conditions of poverty, misery, and degradation into which the system has cast people and is determined to keep people in. The law and order the police are about, with all of their brutality and murder, is the law and the order that enforces all this oppression and madness. True words.
Yes.
But we don't have to keep putting up with this oppression and this madness. We should live, and we could live in a society where those entrusted with public security would sooner risk or lose their own lives than kill or injure any of the people they're supposed to be protecting and serving. This kind of society could be brought into being, and it will take revolution to do that. Which brings us back to the question of what are you ready to do to stop this shit? Now, I mentioned the bill the Democrats named after George Floyd. They pushed it forward back in 2020 and it didn't go anywhere, but they are reviving talk about it. In fact, at his funeral, politicians and preachers talked about what we got to do is get this George Floyd Justice in Policing Act passed. Well, the first thing is, things ain't changed in Congress. You know, the Republicans are not going to pass a Reform Policing Act, and they can block it. But then, look at the act itself. What is it about? What will it do even if it could get passed? And let's get real, snowballs have a better chance of going through hell than this bill has of getting through Congress. That's just the reality. But even if it did, what does it do? And here's what they say about it. They say it establishes a framework to prevent and remedy racial profiling by law enforcement. It also limits the unnecessary use of force and restricts the use of no-knock warrants, chokeholds, and carotid holes. In other words, its basic premise is police will keep on brutalizing and murdering people, but this act will hold them accountable after they do it. And it won't even do that. Because some of the shit that they're passing in this bill, or they're proposing in this bill, is already law in a number of places. Chokeholds? Chokeholds have been illegal in New York for quite some time. What good did it do when those police choked Eric Garner to death? You know, a lot of this stuff has already been outlawed, and the outlawing of it comes down to nothing when pigs carry it out, because they were acting in fear for their lives. So, look, we gotta take that to heart. We gotta understand that. Now, there is a new wrinkle in the George Floyd Policing Act: qualified immunity. And they're saying, well, if we get this will really deal with it. And what they mean by qualified immunity: police departments in many cities, but not all of them, and individual police have an immunity for any civil suits against them for things that they carry out. So that's what qualified immunity, they're talking about removing that immunity so that you could sue the police department or sue the individual cops if they brutalize or murder somebody. Again, this is working on the problem after it's already happened, after they brutalized somebody, after they've murdered somebody. You can sue them about it. We gotta stop it, not act around it after it's happened. And look, what it'll come down to is, because there are police departments who are no longer immunized against this. And all it's really meant is that they have had to get better insurance, to make settlements to people who their pigs are brutalized or murdered. And that's what it will mean to individual cops if it ever got passed. They would have to be supplied with some better insurance so that would cover that. And look, since we're here in New York, let's deal with this fact. The way that New York City deals with this is they put tens of millions of dollars into their annual budget because they know their pigs are going to brutalize and murder people. And that's how they deal with it. They just levy the taxes to have the money so that when they have to put out a settlement, there it is. And this is part of, what do you call it? The cost of functioning.
Cost of doing business.
Yeah, that's it, the cost of doing business. So let's be for real. None of this is going to stop it. We have to get at what is it going to take to do that. Now look, there are people who genuinely hate seeing the police carry out this wanton brutality and murder and want to see it ended, who take the approach of taking up the program of defunding and or dismantling the police. Many people approach prisons like Rikers Island in the same way. Their goal is to reduce the funding of these institutions and or to replace them with a different kind of police force or a different kind of detention institution, one that wouldn't brutalize or torture people the way they do right now. Along with this, they aim to shift the funding the police and prisons get now towards meeting the needs of the people that these institutions target with repression. And people going at this, they have overwhelmingly good intentions and aims, but will this achieve the necessary result? The necessary result being ending this horror once and for all. And it will not, and it cannot. Because look, it doesn't come to grips with the nature of the beast that they're setting out to tame. And based on that, it doesn't really address why tens of millions of people in this country are locked into conditions of poverty, misery, and degradation, why even so many formerly better off sections of people have been downsized to less stable and lower wage positions, and why the system has frontline enforcers they deploy to terrorize masses of people, to keep them locked into those conditions that I mentioned earlier. Now, this is something that Bob Avakian digs into deeply in an article titled Police in Prisons, Reformist Illusions and the Revolutionary Solution. And that article is in a pamphlet which you can also get here at Revolution Books, and people should check it out. As to why cops inflict the terror that they do, here's what he has to say. The ruling powers of this system need this kind of brutal police force, not only to violently enforce racial oppression, as significant as that is. This system rests upon and continually gives rise to social divisions and conflicts between masses of people in the ruling class and among the masses themselves. Conflicts which hold the potential for and frequently erupt into violence and chaos, which in some circumstances can reach dimensions that threaten the stability of the system. So the capitalist ruling class requires a force of organized institutional violence, the police as well as the military, to contain and control these conflicts and to forcibly suppress them when they erupt into violence and chaos that does immediately or potentially threaten the established order. Even with real and in some ways sharp differences among them about some of the particulars of how this should be carried out, the entire ruling class is in fundamental agreement on the need for this, because once again it flows from and corresponds to the fundamental nature and requirements of this system. And on why the system won't incorporate those on the bottom of the society into better positions in its economy or raise the situations of people who've lost their better off status over previous decades. Look, he basically lays out, despite what any politician may say, there's no way the system could reverse itself. Because people have not ended up on the bottom of this society, locked out of the formal economy, forced to hustle and things like that by accident or by bad choices that they made. They ended up there because of conditions that this system established, moving factories in legitimate ways to get to survive and raise families, first out of the cities and then out of the whole country, because they found people elsewhere they could exploit even more viciously than those in the inner cities. That's what put people in the operation of a capitalist imperialist system, with the US capitalists moving to maintain and extend a competitive edge against their rivals, meaning they had to find people they could exploit more, sources of cheap labor, things like that. And they're not going to reverse that and bring all that industry back because it would cut into the profit margin. And then the other thing is they're not going to address this question of what they have done to black and brown people, mainly, who are concentrated in what they call the underclass, because any steps taken to do that could unravel the glue of white supremacy, which this system is not only founded on, but it helps keep the system together. So on the terms of this system, Avakian points out, from the point of view of its ruling class, this would bring about severe damage to the competitiveness of American capital and massive social upheaval. This is highly destructive and irrational from the point of view of a capitalist imperialist exploiter. And that's why this will not happen under this system. Going further, he says, a serious contradiction in this society, something which is the result of the workings of this system itself, but at the same time does cause real problems for the system's ruling class, is the fact that there are large numbers of people among the oppressed who have been effectively locked out of the regular economy, and for whom, in the conditions and on the terms of this system, crime seems like the only means to make a way in the world, even with all the risk it involves. A heartbreaking part of this is the fact that in this situation, large numbers of oppressed youth in the inner cities are killing each other. These days especially, there are all kinds of fascist asses braying about black on black crime. These racists are complete hypocrites. They care nothing about the horrors that the masses of black people suffer, and they raise black on black crime only to distract attention from or to justify the police terror and murder against black people, to convey the message that black people are a bunch of animals who need to be kept in check as violently as necessary by the police. But the reality is that black people, and in particular the youth, killing each other is a very real and serious problem and a cause of deep anguish for all those who genuinely want to see an end to this and to the conditions and ways of thinking that have given rise to it and keep it going. That's another quote from Bob Avakian. And Avakian ends this article by speaking to why and how the horrors of policing and prisons in this country could really be ended in a future socialist society that a real revolution would bring into being. Because look, there won't be a need for a police force that tramples on the rights of the people or terrorizes whole sections of the population. The new revolutionary society would not tolerate such acts, and the people it recruits into its public security forces would be oriented in the opposite direction. They would know that they are expected to risk their own lives in order to protect people, not given a pass to brutalize and murder people the way cops are today. Now, somebody who heard about this program responded to us saying that you all should wake up to the reality that revolution is no more likely than defunding the police. Well, look, that just is not true. This system may appear to be too powerful to be overthrown, but if you dig beneath the surface, you see cracks and crevices in its seemingly invulnerable facade. This system is full of contradictions. There's the police terror that I've been talking about that's built into its fabric and framework. The Christian fascist-dominated Supreme Court just took away a woman's right to have an abortion. And these fascists are on an offensive that puts the rights of women and their very humanity under sharp assault. They're doing the same thing with regard to LGBTQ people. The very operation of this system is grinding up the environment of the planet that we live on today. You have wars going on, including the proxy war between the US and Russia over Ukraine, a war which is dragging the world closer to nuclear conflagration. And there's the way that no matter who's in the White House, this system continues to subject immigrants to outrageous attacks and forces them to live in subhuman conditions. All of these horrors stem from the nature and operation of this capitalist system. And they impel many, many people to rise in resistance and rebellion. And today, the deep divisions among the rulers that I talked about before and infighting among them are creating conditions that make revolution more possible. This is a rare time, a moment in which the stability of the system is being called into question and its vulnerability is being opened up. The deepening and sharp conflicts and the way this can make life more unsettled and chaotic for growing sections of people provide a stronger basis to break the hold the system has over the ways people think and act. The way the fascists in and around the Republican Party refuse to abide by the norms of how this system used to function can shake the way most people think that this system will always be as stable as it is now and will always have the power that it has. This is weakening people's faith in and allegiance to the system. Together with the intensifying attacks that are being brought down, this can drive more and more people to search for some way to bring something different and better into existence. Right now, many decent people see the intensifying horrors posed by the fascists, but they think the only thing that can save them from that is the Democratic Party. The truth is, the Democrats are a ruling class party just like the Republicans, and they are in no way fighting for the interest of the people. And they have no answers that are in the interest of the people. They have differences with the fascists, but these come down around what's the best way to keep this system in effect. And keeping this system in effect means keeping the exploitation and oppression that it enforces on humanity going. But the intensifying attacks and the increasing vulnerability of the system won't by themselves bring this system down. That will take revolution. It will take those of us who are serious about wanting to see these horrors ended, doing all we can right now to bring to people the actual reality of life under this system, the horrors it perpetrates on people, why it continues to do so, and why and how things could be different through a real revolution. This brings me back to a question I posed earlier. What are you going to do? Fundamentally, we face two choices. Either we continue to put up with what the system enforces on people here and around the world and condemn humanity to never-ending misery, brutality, and degradation, or we make revolution and through that end all these horrors. The movement for an actual revolution that Bob Avakian leads is putting revolution on the map in 2023. It is spreading the message of revolution everywhere. It's getting the recent interviews that Avakian did on the Revolution Nothing Less show up close and personal with Bob Avakian, Heart and Soul and Hardcore for Revolution. We're getting that everywhere in society. We're raising money needed to have a big impact in doing that. And we're fighting the power and transforming the people for revolution. And if you want to learn more about how we're doing that, watch the RevCom's weekly YouTube show, The Revolution Nothing Less Show, which premieres every Thursday at 8 o'clock East Coast time, and then you can work it over to the other time zones if you're traveling somewhere else, because it's on YouTube, and YouTube pops up everywhere. Also, regularly check out the website revcom.us. There's a lot that really needs to be done right now, a lot that calls for heart and courage. People should not stand by and watch the pigs brutalize and murder people. They should not remain passive as La Migra and the whole damn system launches attacks on immigrants that's putting people in life-threatening situations. They shouldn't stand by while fascist thugs attack people. Now, in saying this, I ain't saying let's initiate some violent attacks on anybody, but people do have the right to defend themselves and to defend others who come under attack. And that's a right that people need to be exercising. And to the youth whom this system offers no meaningful future, youth this country has locked on the bottom of society and gotten caught up in fighting and killing each other, Bob Avakian and the movement for revolution he leads has a message. Get out of fighting and killing each other. That's what the system wants you to do, because it makes it easier for them to keep you and everybody else under tighter control. Get into this revolution. Dig into it and learn more about it. And as you learn, begin now to spread it. Because look, we go out to the projects here in Harlem every week with this message. Join us in doing that. If you think that there's somewhere else that people who catch the hardest hell under this system, people who need this revolution the most are concentrated, tell us about it. And we can connect up and go there together. Join us in spreading the interviews that Bob Avakian's recently done everywhere and in raising the funds needed to have the biggest impact possible with this. And come up with your own fundraising projects in doing that. This movement for an actual revolution, look, we're small now. We need people like you to join us. People for whom our message of revolution resonates need to join us in spreading that message and to join us in fighting the power and transforming the people for revolution. And look, do not tell me you don't want to follow a white leader or that the masses of black people can't be expected to follow a white leader. Here's how you need to approach this. You need to get serious about revolution, serious about ending these horrors, serious enough to dig into what's needed to do that, how it could be done, and to check out a leader who has laid out an answer to the question of how it could be done. Dig into it. Learn about it. Critically assess it. You see shortcomings in it, bring those shortcomings back to us and let's get into it about them. Because look, you can't just wave this off and seriously be trying to deal with this stuff. Take this up, dig into it, and if you find out that it's correct, because that's what I found, and I went through exactly that process back in the 1970s, including taking my opposition to Bob Avakian and arguing with him about it. Right. And that's a big part of why I'm standing here right now as a follower of Bob Avakian, because we got into those questions and he pointed out that he actually did know the way forward, and that if I wanted to be part of making a revolution, I needed to get with what he was doing. That's what we got to do. And also, don't give me the bullshit about, oh, that's a cult. People who say that either don't know what a cult is, or they hope you don't know what a cult is, so you won't know that they're running bullshit to you. And they hope you won't bother to learn what a cult really is, so that you won't look at this movement for a real revolution, assess what it's actually saying and what it is doing, and make your determination based on that. Look, I'm going to wind up here, but I want to go back to those two choices. Either continuing to put up with this shit and condemning humanity to never-ending misery, degradation, and brutality, or making revolution to end it. And look, people continuing to suffer horror after horror, the way I've been talking about black people, brown people being murdered again and again by the police. We could have been talking about the attacks on the right to abortion, the way they're targeting birth control. We could be talking about what's happening in relation to LGBTQ people, immigrants. We could be talking about a lot of different ways the system's coming at us. These continuing attacks are a tragedy. A greater tragedy would be things coming to a head in the next year or two as these fascists aggressively move to re-seize power and to consolidate it and to hammer in the horrible kind of rule that fascism would mean in this country, with the only forces being out there to oppose them being the Democratic Party, which has no real answers, no answers in the interest of humanity, and seemingly no answer to the offensive of these fascists, or people who are promoting reformism that will not even touch the problem, or people saying, let's defund the police, let's abolish the police, who don't deal with how you're going to get this system to abolish its own police, to abolish the prisons that it needs. That would be like going to the slave masters and saying, you know, your slave chasers are really abusing the enslaved people. Would you abolish them so that those abuses don't happen, but not getting to the root of it, which was the slave system? So that's what we got to do. We got to dig into this revolution. Get this revolution out there starting now. Build up the organizational structure for revolution right now. Build up its muscles through going out and acting, fighting the power and transforming the people for revolution. Making this revolution something that many more people are learning about and being drawn to. And being drawn to right now. So last words, what are you going to do? Yeah. That's it.
All right, so let's hear it for Carl Dix again. And I just want to say a few words about upcoming events and about the bookstore. I see some new people who have joined the audience since I welcomed you all at the outset. So my name is Raymond Lotta. I'm hosting the program, and you are at Revolution the Books, the bookstore about the world for a radically different world. And we're making it real here, and I want people to know about, you know, some of what's going to be happening. First of all, Carl mentioned the Revolution Nothing Less show. He mentioned these interviews. You saw an excerpt of this interview with Bob Avakian. And we're calling on you to join efforts to raise $100,000 by February 19th. And this is in the service of the National Revolution Tour, the National RevComs community. And as I said, the goal is to raise $100,000. They've raised $65,000 so far? Huh?
68.
$68,000, okay? February 19th, they want to, you know, hit that target. And what is this money going for? Well, you saw the interview. This has to get out far and wide. All of you, parts 1, 2, and 3. This is an extensive interview with Bob Avakian. And this is about the future hanging in the balance. And here is a leader who has brought forth the analysis and the strategy to make the revolution that humanity needs. And Carl laid out why that is possible now in this rare time. We have to get that interview out widely. It is a game changer where people will learn about why we need this revolution, how we can make it, what its aims are, and how you can become part of it. So that has to get out widely. The Revolution Nothing Less show, Carl mentioned it. Funds will be going towards that. This is the lifeline with RevCom in this bookstore. The lifeline to this revolution to emancipate humanity. Every week, the Revolution Nothing Less YouTube show. Analysis of world events. Commentary. You learn more about the new communism and the strategy to make this revolution. And it takes on other reformist programs and illusions that lock people, into the deadly embrace of this system. This fund drive to raise $100,000 is going to support young people who are on the front lines, part of this National Revolution Tour, who are working 24/7 to spread this revolution. So there will be a national live stream February 19th. We're going to watch it together, right? Here at this bookstore. And you can become part of it. So I also want to just mention something that I learned coming into the program today in relation to that. An Iranian who lives abroad here in the United States and who has been involved in building support for this incredible and heroic uprising of women in Iran and joined by men and people from around the world in solidarity, rose up against this brutal theocratic state. And he has come to programs here at Revolution Books, the bookstore about the world for a radically different world, where the whole world comes first. He has come to some of the programs we did, one of which Carl spoke at in solidarity with this uprising in Iran. And he announced that he is donating $250 in appreciation of the work that this bookstore has done. And he is earmarking it for this $100,000 campaign. Okay? Let that be a summoning to all of you. And we're going to be working together on raising these funds. We have a lot of creative ideas, but that brings me to my next point, which is Revolution Books here. And we can't make it without you, without your ideas, without your creative energy becoming part of the life of this bookstore. And we have some programs coming up that I want to inform you about. We have regular features. And don't forget, there are the books on the walls. There is an online website, an online ordering platform where you can get these books. And all of what we've been talking about, this new communism, what Bob Avakian has developed, this breakthrough for humanity, is these books are here, and you can get into it, and you can get into discussion with us here on the staff of this bookstore. And what we have coming up, tomorrow, come by, 3 p.m., but all day, because we're going to kind of loosen it up because the weather is what it is, right? But stop by tomorrow if you want to get deeper into these questions. We'll be here to discuss it. We'll be showing more of what you got a taste of today. The Bob Avakian interviews, and getting on this mission, becoming part of the mission to put revolution on the map in 2023. That's the essence of this fundraising drive, where that money, those funds are going to, and all of us contributing in big and small ways to putting revolution, this real revolution on the map. 2023, we're going to be discussing that mission tomorrow, so come by. And then I'm going to need some help from my esteemed colleagues here at Revolution Books on February, let me just make sure I have all this right. Okay. So, on February 8th, we're going to have, this Wednesday, we're going to have a meeting to discuss that fund drive and all of what I was sort of touching on and get deeper into it and people's ideas. Then on February 22nd, there will be a special program hosted by Raymond Latta, that's me, and we're going to be discussing a research essay pamphlet that I put out, and it's actually the topic that's a really critical one, and the title of this program is going to be 7 p.m. Wednesday, the 22nd. The title of that is The Industrialization of Sexual Exploitation and Imperialist Globalization, or Why Sex Work is Not Agency, but Degradation and Nightmare. And this is a very controversial question. We'll be getting into that, both why this incredible rise of sexual exploitation on a global scale, and the debates and the controversy, because there are people that rationalize this, you know, as something that's female empowerment. We'll get into it, okay? So that program, and again, coming out to these discussions here at Revolution Books, ways in which you can get involved in all of that. Then, as I said, we have the 19th here where we'll be coming together to watch the live stream to raise these funds. I want to point out, Brenda and Tatu, please turn around, face the audience. Okay? They are here from the staff, and you can talk to them about how you can get involved as a volunteer. If you want to just share some ideas and thoughts right here and now. And you can also become a donor to Revolution Books and become a monthly sustainer and learn more about how you can join in and energize the life of this bookstore, okay? So that's what I wanted to say, unless I've omitted something. I hope and think not. And we're now going to take just a micro pause to clear the podium, and then huh? You don't like that micro pause? Okay, okay. We're going to take a micro pause to get into the macro questions that were put on the table here, okay? So we're going to clear this, and then we're going to bring you in with your comments, your questions in response to Carl's talk. And once again, welcome to Revolution Books, and join the revolution to emancipate all of humanity. Okay, so, you know, Carl gave a very meaty talk, and I know people in the audience have a lot of thoughts coming into the program, and probably a lot of questions coming off of Carl's presentation, and thoughts provoked by it. So, let me see a show of hands of people that would like to comment, ask a question. Can I just see who would like to...
Don't be shy.
Let me ask, are there people in the room who are familiar with, you know, this this program of defunding the police and abolishing the prisons? Are people, you know, have people encountered this? Have they been, you know, heard people speak about it? There are some notable figures, you know, who are associated with it. There's something called critical resistance going back to the 90s. Angela Davis is someone who's been an advocate of this abolitionism. We've had a speaker here at Revolution Books, Dorothy Roberts, who wrote an excellent book, Torn Apart, in which she presents her approach to abolishing, you know, the child welfare system and creating some kind of positive alternative to it because of the very punitive police-like character of the child custody and protective services, kids being ripped away from them, put into the foster care system. So this is a very influential trend of thought, which Carl got into. So, you know, if there are people that have some questions about this, who've been influenced by that, let's put it all on the table. Let's clarify, together. And if you want Carl to kind of explain something further, because you were unclear, then definitely let's do that. So, again, the floor is open to your questions and comments. Yeah, and then hold on. We're going to need time to get the mic to you.
Thank you so much for your talk, Carl. What do you think happened after the beautiful uprising of millions and millions of people across the country after the murder of George Floyd? I mean, it traveled to every state, big cities, small towns, even internationally, and then just fizzled out. To me, it seemed like if there was going to be a revolution, that might have been a prime time for it.
Okay, well, that's a good question. I mean, because look, we call it the beautiful uprising because it was beautiful. It was beautiful in the massive numbers of people who took to the street. It was beautiful in the diversity of people who took to the street, because it wasn't just black people saying, stop letting your pigs kill us and get away with it. It was people of all races and nationalities, and like you say, it not only spanned the whole country, it went around the world. And it was beautiful in the depth of what people were raising, because they were saying stop police murdering black people, and they were saying no more white supremacy, and that foul shit too. So that was a very beautiful thing. But when there are uprisings like that, a question gets posed of how do you move on achieving the sentiment that so many people have? And that's a question of leadership. And actually, Avakian was speaking to that in relation to shortcomings in the relationship that the movement for an actual revolution gave in that moment. Because we were out in the midst of that. In fact, I went out to Minneapolis to be a part of the uprising and to bring to it a message of revolution. And at various times I spoke to hundreds and even thousands of people about the need for revolution to end this. But as Avakian pointed out, we did not get to the question of comparing and contrasting different programs, because one of the things that was actually very big in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area was this thing of, we're going to abolish the police. We're going to defund the police. And in fact, the city council even passed, something to the order of...
This was Minneapolis.
This is Minneapolis, yes, Minneapolis. Passed something along the lines of doing that. Of course, they rescinded it a little bit later. But it became a question of what direction are people going to go in? How are they going to achieve these righteous aims that motivated them to take to the street, had them in the street, and they were voicing them in the street? And that is where things were lacking. There was not a force that had a sufficient enough understanding of how to go about taking things in the direction they needed to go. And with that, I'm, criticizing the work that I did, the work that the Movement for an Actual Revolution did. We put out the need for revolution, but that was put out alongside of a bunch of other programs. People who heard our program in relation to other programs applauded for both of them. And some of the people who were putting out other programs were like, yeah, and I'm for revolution too. We did not say, okay, let's compare and contrast these programs. Let's get into it. What do you mean when you say you're going to defund the police? You're going to abolish the police? What are you actually saying? Are you saying you're going to allow this system to remain in effect, and within that, try to get the police defunded, try to get them abolished? How will that actually happen? Where will that take things? And that kind of the clash of the different programs, because that's what was needed. Some things were going to take things one way, some things were going to take them another, and there needed to be a fight over where will this take things, where will it lead, versus where revolution will take things and where things will lead. And in this case, with the people who had been impelled into motion by the horror of the murder of George Floyd, the idea of defunding or abolishing the police is what ended up, that had a lot of resonance with people. It struck people, and I talked with some people about this, they felt that was the most radical thing they could be a part of. And some of that was because revolution was not in their framework. Revolution, overthrow the system, they saw that as something way off in the future, not something you could do right now. And they saw abolition as something they could take up and work on now, even though they didn't really know how you abolish the police. And some of the people who were pushing that forward most fervently, I learned later, their revolutionary inclinations that had them going for the most radical thing they could find ended up with them being led to go to city council meetings to lobby members of the city council to not overturn their resolution to abolish the police force. I think that's what it was. And that ended up like choking the radical spirit out of people. You know, that's not radical activity, lobbying city council people. So that's how I see that.
I'd like to just start by saying thank you for your talk. We saw your article in the Columbia Spec, but and thought we'd come check it out. I was going to ask about, just for you to speak on the development of Cop City in Atlanta, especially in a historically black city of Atlanta, and the further militarization of the police.
Look, when there was the beautiful uprising, there were a lot of official statements of, you know, we're with this. Cities painted Black Lives Matter. You know, right by the White House, Black Lives Matter was painted on the streets. Other cities did that. Corporations made statements and stuff like that. But at the same time, the rulers were not at all moving away from their need for the police. You know, New York City ended up with Giuliani's twin black brother as their new elected mayor. And I'm not kidding, Eric Adams is a black Giuliani. You know, cities around the country, the same thing happened. You saw Avakian doing a takeoff on Joe Biden and his stumbling and fumbling fund the police thing that he did at a major statement that he made. So on the one hand, people were expressing their outrage at the way the police had operated, and there was some backing, there was some public, what would you call it, dust thrown in people's eyes. But at the same time, there was building up and buttressing of the police. And Atlanta was a place where they gave it a new name. I mean, here in New York, they didn't give it a new name because a lot of what Adams did was bring back things that had been in existence in New York. He brought back the street crimes unit, but it was an old thing because there used to be a street crimes unit. He brought back stop and frisk, but that was an old thing too. That used to be what the police did. In Atlanta, they felt the need to really go forward on this and institute some, and very openly do this. And that actually tells us something about how this system sees its police and the need for brutal enforcers.
Good, Carl. Just
go ahead. Add to
yeah,
this.
I just want to do. It's an important question that you're asking. Can I see a show of hands? Who do people know what this cop city in Atlanta is? Raise your hand if you know what that is.
Okay, so some people.
Yeah, so I think it's. Here's what, and you obviously know about it, right? Yeah. So, look, Cop City is this is the term, the shorthand for a vast expansion of policeification in Atlanta, and it involves the construction of a special facility, right? In a kind of a wooded, protected forest area, you know, in the Atlanta area. Are people with me? So there have been a number of people who have organized over the, you know, against this and have actually taken up resistance in that forest area. This is an incredible thing, this Cop City. I mean, it's a huge investment of funds. This gets back to Carl's, you know, theme. You know, defund the police. No, they are refunding and upfunding the police. And this Cop City, which is the term used for this new facility, and it is a facility where cops, and you can correct me or add to this, are being trained in urban crowd control. Okay, what is that a euphemism for, friends? Suppression of the people. So that's bad enough. But this was the brainchild of the Democratic political establishment in Atlanta, right? And the people that have been organizing against this, who are in the forest, and I mean, both to protect this, you know, this beautiful area, but also to take a stand against this, you know, escalating policification of society, have come under savage attack. And there's a wonderful interview in the current issue of Revcom.us, with one of the organizers of that resistance. And just recently, someone was shot and killed by the Atlanta police. And, you know, this was... Huh?
Georgia State Police.
Yeah, and this is like Nazi-like tactics. They're just going in and, you know, trying to wipe people out, creating, you know, all this intimidation. So this is a very important lesson, right? Because Atlanta was one of these places, right, where the quote-unquote enlightened democratic political establishment, right, this is your point, was showing common cause, you know, with those who were protesting. And this is what it morphed into, and Carl's whole point about what people have been, you know, sort of bamboozled, you know, by. And, you know, this is the essence of the matter, Cop City, you know, what they're trying to do with that. So I think people can take a look at this interview. People should be aware of what's happening. This is savage, you know, the way in which they've cracked down on these protesters and people resisting this. And it also just tells you something about the nature of this system, the Democratic Party. And one of the last thing I just wanted to say about it is the people that were organizing against this were accused of being outside agitators, okay, that they were coming in from around the country, right? And of course, the people that were there, you'll see this in the interview, you know, people were there from Atlanta, people from Georgia, people from all around the country. What the fuck? You're standing up against injustice, right? And just that week was MLK Day, right? And MLK, I mean, leaving aside that he was kind of a reformist, right? But wherever he went, he was accused of being an outside agitator. right? And here the same Democratic black political establishment hailing Martin Luther King, who was the quote-unquote outside agitator by the Southern segregationists, right? These people now are being labeled outside agitators in the same vein that the Southern segregationists back in the 60s were accusing anyone standing up against injustice. So I'm saying this is, what we're witnessing. So the upscaling of police, tactics and methods, it's happening in New York City. They've given it all kinds of covers, with Adams, etc. So, more on the urgency of the situation we're confronting and the need for people to break with these illusions. And the last thing I just wanted to say quickly in terms of your question, which is very important, Carl has addressed this, there is a difference between a protest, a rebellion, a righteous and militant rebellion, and an actual revolution, right? And a revolution is, millions of people rising up, tens of millions of people rising up under visionary and scientific leadership to overthrow the system and bring an alternative, a liberatory alternative into being. That's what a revolution is, to overthrow the existing system and it's defeating its military and forces and dismantling. You want to talk about that a revolution dismantles the armed forces of the capitalist imperialist system, and that is going to require an armed uprising. We are not in a situation right now where that's possible, but the revolution is becoming more possible, and that's what we're, the revolutionaries are preparing for, raising people's sights to that, organizing the forces for this revolution, and building up the organizational muscle, and we have the leadership for it. So an uprising like that following the death of George Floyd showed, and this was an important talk, an article given by Bob Avakian, the tremendous potential for revolution in this society. And now it's on us to be on the mission, to put this revolution on the map and organize people into it. 20 million white people are estimated to have been involved in protests in solidarity with George Floyd during that period. It's a very revealing, and inspiring fact that it had such deep resonance among broad sections of society. Again, the potential for revolution.
Thank you for this platform. Mr. Carl, you have been doing this for a long time, and I guess this is a segue into, you were just speaking about. We are in a militant state. We're in late stage capitalism. And my question to you is, in practical terms, what suggestions do you have to effectively and consistently motivate, agitate, and organize people in a system where, like, for example, I'm a mental health provider. I deal with a lot of trauma. And I find that whenever there are these beautiful uprisings, people then come back, feel marginalized, and they feel hopeless. And I just wonder, from a veteran like you in this movement, what suggestions do you have, since revolution sounds very abstract to the average person? Thank you.
Okay, look. Revolution today does strike people as it might be a nice idea, but isn't that something way off? And don't we need something practical that we can do right now? And see, look, there's a couple of problems with that. The first is that things are rapidly transforming right before our eyes. I mean, look, 2 years ago, the fascists tried to pull a coup. That's what January 6th was. It was a coup attempt. They didn't succeed, but that's what they were actually aiming to do. And now all the indications are that they want to work this again and succeed this time. So we have to actually bring reality right down to people, and together with that say, and here are the things we need to do right now. I made this point about we need to bring together the organizational structure needed for revolution. We actually need to get people organized for revolution now, not later we're going to try to do that. And what that does mean is, look, I said we go out to the projects. We meet people there. Last time I was there, we went out with a loudspeaker on a day when it was dead in the projects. It didn't seem like there was anybody there. We started doing the loudspeaker anyway, somewhat because, you know, I can be a little bit stubborn. And I'm going on the loudspeaker, and a guy comes out of the building, and it turns out he was laying in his bed, depressed about the situation. Exactly some of what you were thinking about. Then he began to hear what I was saying on this loudspeaker, and he's like, I got to meet those people. And he runs down, and he connects up with us. And it was very critical then, and it remains critical, that it not just be he met some people who were saying things that resonated with him, and then he goes back upstairs and all that recedes and he lays down in his bed and gets depressed again. We actually need to connect with people like that and unleash them to organize for this revolution. And that does mean learning what this revolution is about and spreading it to other people, and doing that right now. That's why I talked about getting these interviews everywhere. We're going to sit down with him. We're going to watch these interviews. We need to begin to watch the Revolution Nothing Less show with people like that, and you'll see things from people in Los Angeles marching to LAPD headquarters after the LAPD murdered 3 black and brown men who are having mental crises, the people that I talked about. You'll see people around the country acting, and you'll see exposure of what this system is doing. And we have to mobilize people to fight the power and transform themselves and others for revolution. That's what that slogan that I used meant. Fight the power and transform the people for revolution. It's got to be the case that more and more people see a force that is out there that is building resistance to the attacks that come down and bringing to people the fact that these attacks stem from the nature of this system. This is not a one-time thing that they come at us like this, and we can't let our resistance be a one-time thing. It's got to be resistance to a particular attack from the perspective of targeting the system that causes it and building up a force that can take it on. Now, just reflecting back, it was very important in the 1960s when I heard about the Black Panther Party. Here was a force that was going right in the face of their pigs. You know, and as far as I understood it, every black person knew what that was about. And almost every black person was glad that it was happening and wanted to check out the people who were doing it. I kind of wanted to check them out, but I was also a little bit like, they're going out right in the face of these pigs. I don't know about that. Well, I ended up getting drafted into the Army, so I was never able to connect with them. But there needs to be a force that's out there that people are seeing take this on. And that's a message we take to people in the projects. We take it to students on campus. Every now and then we take it down to 125th and Malcolm X Boulevard. But that needs to be out there. People need to see a force that is taking this on. They need to see that force growing, sinking roots. They need to see it taking on the attacks that the system brings down. That's what people need to do, and we don't have that force yet. We don't have enough force doing that, but we can't say, well, we're going to get the force first and then we'll start doing it. We have to do it now, and we have to tell people who look at this situation are depressed by it, think it's horrible, but what can we do? First thing they got to understand, they're not the only one who thinks that way. A whole lot of other people feel that way. And what's required is that some people who feel that way got to stand up, got to join in resistance to it. And in some cases, you got to be the first. You know, and that's always a daunting thing. I know that because Ray made some mention of, it was actually the Fort Lewis 6.
What did I say?
You said the Fort Dick 6.
That was in honor. That was in honor of you, Carl.
No, there is a Fort Dix, but that's not where I got arrested and put in prison. Look, when this was coming down and it was like, am I going to go to Vietnam? Am I, a black man, going to go fight for this white man system killing yellow people? It wasn't like there was a whole lot of people saying we're not going and I could just join in with them.
Right. Yeah.
I felt like I was the only one, you know, but I was like, well, am I going to do it or not? Am I going to be the kind of person who's going to go kill people for this system, people who I got no beef with, and there was no legitimate basis for what the U.S. was doing to those people? Was I going to be a part of it? And there was a big movement going on around the country, which I kind of felt like, well, that's some backing. But I had to stand up at that fort and tell the guy who was telling this other guy, go get a gun, make him get in this truck and take him over to the overseas replacement station. And I had to stand up myself and say, I ain't fucking going. Well, actually, I sat down. You know, I just sat down right there and said, I ain't going. And then they got another truck and took me to the prison. But somebody had to stand up. That's what it comes down to. Right. And we both have to bring out to people what the bigger reality is, what it is that's actually making them feel depressed and all like that, and their right to hate it. That other people feel that way, and we need to reach to them and begin to convince them. We need to take the message to everybody that things don't have to be this way, but everybody's not going to move all at once. So some people are going to have to stand up, step out, including some people are going to have to be the first ones in a certain sense. Not in the sense that there's no movement out here that is working to put revolution on the map, because that's what our movement is working to do, you know, and we need all kinds of help in doing that. And we need to spread that to people, take it to them. Develop ways that people can get together to dig into this, because that creates a different kind of framework too. You know, if you're feeling bad about all this shit but don't see anything that could be done about it, and you get together with some other people and you look at something like the statement that the Revolution Club in Los Angeles issued on the steps of the LAPD headquarters, calling out the murder of these three young men, calling out the system that's responsible for it, putting forward the need for revolution, and calling on people to step into it, then you get a sense that, well, I'm not the only one that this resonates with. And then you can argue out, like, can this do any good? Where could it go? What does it need to do? Where is this coming from? What about the leader that these people are putting forward? But we need to get that kind of thing going, and collective forms for it to be going on in is a very important, I think, ingredient to moving things. And sorry, I should have been more concise with that, but it just rolled out how it rolled out.
You know, people should look at the, the question, look at the Bob Avakian interviews. This is an incredible resource for understanding this process of, building the forces for revolution. And, he gets into how we can go from a small force that we are today to going from the hundreds and the thousands to the millions, by applying ourselves, by applying this revolutionary strategy, the roadmap for revolution. And I just wanted to say, in terms of what Carl is putting before us here, is, Bob Avakian has talked about what he calls the three prepares. How are we going to be making and preparing this revolution? And he talks about, one, we have to be preparing the ground, changing the political situation so it's more favorable to revolution. The alignments, where people stand, vis-a-vis the big questions of the day. The uprising in Iran, the war in Iraq, the war over Ukraine, right? So, I'm sorry? The war over Ukraine between the U.S. and the Russian imperialists, right? We have to be changing the political situation, so it's more favorable to revolution. We have to be preparing the people, raising their sights to revolution, and challenging them. The kind of talk that Carl gave, what kind of dead ends people are falling into, and also the outlook and the values of the system that people have internalized. It's, I'm in it for me. Right? Or, stay in your lane. Bob Avakian goes deep into this, the ideological obstacles that are standing in the way of this. Right? So preparing the ground, changing the political situation, preparing the people, and preparing the vanguard, the revolutionary leadership, so it can, grow and develop. And all of this is happening in this very acute moment of turmoil. Hey, what happened on the way into the program today, people? The fucking U.S. military shot down that Chinese balloon. Really? Yeah. Oh my God. So the world is in turmoil, right? And we've seen, what happened with the George Floyd uprising, how quickly things, changed. In Iran, it was considered to be a theocratic society in which people were locked down. Yes. And yet this whole thing broke open. Right? So we are carrying on this work, everything that Carl has been describing, in this very acute, intense time. And there can be, and we have the work cut out for us, because Bob Avakian has made it very clear. We have the leadership, we have the science and the strategy, and we have this rare time when revolution becomes more possible. But what is missing in the equation? A revolutionary people. And once, that develops, and we have to develop that quickly. This is a very telescope moment. We have to develop that quickly. But when a revolutionary people steps onto the stage, that can have an incredible transformative and inspiring effect on all of society. And people have to step forward and resist, but that resistance has to be in the service of revolution. Right? We fight the power and transform the people for revolution. We don't want to just be fighting the power and fighting the same battles over and over again. I mean, this is what Carl has been speaking to. The point is, we have a rare time when this revolution becomes more possible, and we can't squander the chance of a lifetime. So that's kind of the challenge that Bob Avakian is putting before us as he has developed this roadmap for how we can go from small forces and many demoralized people. Right? What we're bringing forward, what he's bringing forward, is not hope on an illusory basis, but hope on a scientific basis. The hope that we can actually change the world, change how people are and how society is, and there is the roadmap to do it. That is hope on a scientific basis. And that's what you find here at Revolution Books if we do our work well. So, you know, let's open it up to more people, because I really think people are asking some good questions, and we're kind of probing this, and there's some, you know, experience that people have. Carl is sharing his experience. So, other points, comments? Oh, way off. Okay.
Okay, I am Sister Shirley from the Forgotten Borough of Staten Island, okay? I'm old school, so to my peers, I am Sister Shirley. But if you're young enough to be my child, I'm Aunt Shirley, or Titi or Thea Shirley, okay? I have been out here for decades. I know I don't look it, I mean, hey. But anyway, the bottom line is I most definitely, with all my heart, believe in the revolution, okay? I believe in it for many, many, many decades. But the way I am, the belief is not enough, okay? I go out there and I share it. But for me, I have to do something in the interim. I just can't just put it out there and then have people say, okay, it's all good. Because for them also, what's supposed to be happening in the interim? So what has happened in the interim, Trump got in, okay? And I do understand there's an evil. And also with the Democrats or whatever the case may be, right? But it had gotten to the point where you had to go for the lesser of the two evils. But when there was nobody and nothing that stopped the evil, Trump got in. And it made it much worse. Extremely worse. People didn't even think it could get to that point, but it did. And people who didn't believe that there could be any other difference other than the revolution, right? There were some people who were turned around. You know, hey, the Democrats, this is not a democracy because it's the Democrats and the Republicans. One less evil than the other, but both of them vote both evil. So when Trump got in, it got worse. And even people who didn't believe that there could be a difference, they voted to get him out. I not only encourage people to get out there and vote him out, I told them who to vote for. I told them the only way to get him out was to vote for Biden. Because you couldn't vote your conscience. You couldn't vote for the Green Party. You couldn't vote for the Workers' Party. You couldn't vote for the Independent Party because he would have stayed in and made it worse. So, no, this system does not work. But in the interim, I have to do something. So as you can see, I have a mask on that says defund the cops. No, it's not going to happen overnight. No, it may not happen at all, but I have to do something in the interim. And believing in this revolution, I have to do something. And I do go out there and tell people about the revolution. I share that. And it's put to me, what are we supposed to do in the interim? And that's what I need to feel and to be told. What do we do in the interim? If we just put it out there and let people know that we need a revolution, which we most definitely need, nothing less. How many people are we going to lose? How many people are going to suffer if we just keep on trying to build up the revolution and do nothing else other than that? So I'm begging you, tell me, what do we do in the interim besides building up the revolution? Peace.
Okay, look, I'm tempted to, I'll just do it. Somebody said, okay, revolution is your long-term program, but what's your short-term program? And I thought about it a while and I said, my long-term program is revolution and my short-term program is revolution, because the revolution is not an act that will happen some fine day. It is something that we have to be getting ready for and in position for right now. And what that means is we have to be spreading the word of revolution, bringing to people that things don't have to be this way and why that is true, why that is the case. And that there is a different way the world could be, and that different way both requires a revolution, and on the basis of revolution being made, here is what it could be like. That's why Avakian authored a constitution for a future socialist republic in North America. Let's look at what the world could be like. Let's not be locked in. Ray is pointing out that I have it up here on the table. That's what this is. Because we don't want people to be locked into this system, that this is the way things are and this is the only way they could be. And it means fighting the power, transforming the people for revolution. There is a 2-page thing here, organizing for an actual revolution, 7 key points.
It's on everybody's chair.
Oh, it's on everybody's chair. Now that I didn't know. I was going to say you could get it up front, but you could actually get it from the chair that you're sitting on. And it talks about how to go about this. But it says you got to go about this from the perspective of revolution. You got to take that to people. You got to say that that's where these horrors come from. That's why they will continue to happen unless and until we make revolution. How about somebody reads the first point? Because I don't have one sitting on my chair. Give it to me, I'll read the first point. Not going to read the whole thing. But right at the beginning, it says, everybody who can't stand this world the way it is needs to be challenged to be part of the revolution that is the way out of this madness. And people need to know there is an actual strategy for making this revolution based on the key points of the foundation and roadmap for this revolution and the work by the revolutionary leader Bob Avakian. Something terrible or something truly emancipating, which is a work you can get here. The following is the basic means for carrying out this strategy so that the currently small forces for the revolution that is urgently needed can grow in numbers and strength quickly in a concentrated way and become the powerful force that is needed to lead this revolution. Spreading and popularizing these key points is also an important part of carrying out this strategy. First key point. Set forth and explain in the following basic terms why this is a rare time when revolution becomes more possible even in a powerful country like this. Brutal, murderous white supremacy, male supremacy, and other oppressive relations. The deepening crisis in society and the world overall, including the constant wars and the continuing destruction of the environment. All this cannot be ultimately resolved in any positive way within the confines of the system that rules over this country and dominates the world as a whole. It continues to sketch that out, and then it winds up the first key point with talking about the crisis and deep divisions in society can only be resolved through radical means of one kind or another. Either radically reactionary, that's the way the fascists want to resolve it, but frankly, the Democrats are taking things to radical reactionary shit too. Murderously oppressive and destructive means, or radically emancipating revolutionary means. And this resolution could quite possibly happen one way or another within the next few years. This rare situation with the deepening and sharpening conflicts among the ruling powers and in the society overall provides a stronger basis and greater openings to break the hold of this system over masses of people. In a situation like this, things that have basically remained the same for decades can radically change in a very short period of time. This rare time must not be wasted. It must be seized on to have a real fighting chance to bring about a truly emancipating revolutionary resolution and not be subjected to a terrible, reactionary, murderously oppressive, and destructive resolution. And then it goes on from there to talk about bringing to people the message of the revolution, especially in short, powerful, and popular forms, both online and in real life. And look, people have to get organized into this revolution and be organizing others. And that is spreading the message to them and others, involving them and collectively digging into it, unleashing and organizing them to fight the power and transform the people for revolution. And see, one thing, Shirley, is we have been trying to do that for some time. You know, like when I co-formed the October 22nd Coalition to Stop Police Brutality, Repression, and the Criminalization of a Generation, I thought I was doing that. I thought I was organizing people to fight back and bringing to them the message that we need a revolution. But I was separating that too much. It was the same thing when I co-formed the Stop Mass Incarceration Network with Cornel West. I mean, and we did mobilize a lot of people to fight. Where we were lacking was in consistently bringing forward the message for revolution, the need to get organized for it right now. It was like we were organizing people to fight and talking to them about revolution. Well, we got to transform that to organizing people for revolution, which encompasses organizing and leading people in resistance, but consciously brings forward that resistance as part of getting in position and ready to make the revolution that will end the horrors that have put people in motion once and for all. And we won't get everybody to be revolutionaries in one fell swoop. Like Avakian said in the clip that we had. It's not like if we had done our work right in 2020 during the beautiful uprising, we would have had a revolution then, but we would have organized forces for revolution then, which would have put us in a different position coming out of that and going forward, so that there would be more organizational structure, more muscle, if you will, that had been developed through organizing the revolution so we could carry forward off of that. And that's really what's needed, you know, because lots of people have for decades, and probably longer than that, I know of people doing it for decades. I know of back to the 1970s. There's been this thing of, we need a revolution, we're going to talk with you about revolution, but we need to come up with a program pending revolution. And your program pending revolution has to be revolution, and organizing for it and getting ready for it and developing ways that people can collectively be a part of that, including fighting the power as part of getting ready for revolution, and being very explicit about that, that's what we're doing. We're not trying to reform the police. We're trying to mobilize the people to stop the pigs from getting away with brutalizing and murdering people, with the understanding that really stopping them comes down to making a revolution and getting rid of the system that has them out there. So that's what I would say to that.
Okay.
I really appreciate your impatience, Shirley, and I think that, you know, it's the things that Carl laid out at the beginning of how can we continue to put up with this? And it seems as though, you know, if as something pending revolution, that revolution, you know, as people have been talking about, it seems so far off. You know, but I think that the point is twofold. One is that things are
changing extremely rapidly. This is a very volatile situation, and things could change overnight. And this, the potential that was shown in the beautiful uprising or the thousands of young women and men that came out around rising up for abortion rights too. I mean, people came into the streets around these things, and I think we have to be ready to give that leadership. And I think that the point about the comparing of the different programs that Carl's been talking about is essential. You know, it's not just, well, that's okay, but revolution is a better idea. Those programs of defund the police lead people into continuing to support the way of just seeing the only thing we can do is accountability for when they continue to murder people. And I think we have to really understand that these other programs that are being put out there are deadly. They are leading into a dead alley. They are leading people back into accepting the terms of this system. They're leading away from revolution. They're not leading up to revolution gradually. So I just think that this is, you know, the abolition movement, as they say, that's explicitly, from what I understand, you know, and I haven't read a lot about it, but I've read some on the program, is, oh, we do want all those things, but it's going to take a long time. It's just going to take, you know, for a week. Look, one thing is we don't have a lot of time. There's a situation now where we might actually have a much better chance, exactly because of things like this, you know, what they're preparing for, this cop city. They're not doing that because they're just looking for ways to spend money. They see that the whole society is sharply coming apart, and they see the potential for that, you know, a resistance on a mass scale, even if, you know, people feel alone and stuff. But I just think that we have to look at what's actually going on, the criminality of what the system brings forward, and what is the program going forward to actually stop it. That's, and you know, everything that Carl said about it's rooted in this system. So how do we get rid of that? And is that a real way? And yes, you look at the situation today, and it's very volatile, and people need to decide, what are we going to do? Are we going to, you know, put up with programs that just lead us back into supporting the things that are going on? The Democrats, the George Floyd, you know, just accountability for the murders that are going down? Are we going to just, you know, accede to state by state? We're going to figure out whether women's right to be human beings, full human beings, is going to be decided by some state legislature. Or are we going to say, no, God damn it, the women are full human beings and we have a right to abortion? Those are just examples of the kinds of things that we have to actually, yes, fight, like you're saying, Shirley, fight and be, you know, fight the power. But it's got to be on the basis of understanding what the source of those problems is and where these other programs and these other so-called leaders are taking things, and it's deadly. And we do have to really fight with people to compare those programs and compare, you know, what it's going to take to go forward. So that's it.
Yeah. You know, first off, definitely thank you, Carl, for this discussion and for everyone, you know, who's been contributing their thoughts on it. You know, I think it's, you know, these are super important and very much like questions that are on the minds of people. And I know you can't like, I kind of want to pick up where Molly and Aunt Shirley were coming through. But just talking some about like the ideological things that are in the way, because I feel like that's a lot of where people are at. You know, and I know we can't travel back in time to 2020 or to the beginning of this discussion, but if you were able to like to speak to, because we were out in the streets, you know, all through the beautiful uprising, right? And you heard all these different kinds of arguments from people, from different activists and people you were marching in the streets shoulder to shoulder with, you know, from abolishing the police to defunding the police to following, we need to have more black leadership, we need to have more queer leadership, right? People need to learn to protect their sanity and self-care. I guess, what would you say, kind of, rewinding the clock back, or to people who were out in the streets then, what would you say to kind of people then 3 years ago who were raising these as potential solutions, just to kind of really sharpen up what Molly was saying about, you can speak to how they're dead ends, but, and I think the question I'm asking is, if you're organizing around those things, what are you really organizing for?
Okay, so looking back, what should we have been doing and saying? Is that what you're posing?
Yeah, there's part of it is that, and I think you kind of spoke to that a little bit of like what should we have been saying and doing, but I think in particular those 3 lines or ways of thinking that people who are, so-called activists who are out in the streets around that really raised as solutions. We need to abolish the police, where does that lead you and why can't that be done? We need to have more black leadership or more XYZ leadership, pick an identity that's underrepresented, and we need to have that kind of leadership. A lot of people were also saying that, like that's gonna solve the problem. That's the issue. There aren't enough black leaders, there aren't enough women leaders, there aren't enough non-binary leaders. And then this thing around also defunding the police, those in particular, speaking to people who were advocating those as solutions in particular.
Okay, what we needed to have been doing is making that what we were stepping off into things on the basis of, and one thing about it is I always stepped off of things on the basis of we need a revolution, but I did not from there say what that meant, especially in relation to the different directions that were being put out. Because, I did not start out my career or my activism as a revolutionary understanding all that, but I learned that over the period, and that's what people, and our movement for revolution understood that. And we needed to make that, it needed to be that when people saw us coming, they would be saying, oh, those are the people who are arguing that you're not going to be able to defund the police or abolish the police, that you need a revolution to get rid of the system that has the police out there. Because it's not that we didn't understand that at that point, we understood it. I even told people that, but I did not make it, this is my stepping off point, on this question of leadership, and which is related to a thing of people having their lanes, and if you're not in the lane where this oppression is going down, you can't say anything about this oppression, you can't give any leadership to it. We needed to just sharply say to people, what's the criteria for leadership? And it is not identity, it is not where you fall out on the scale of differently gendered people. It is not your nationality or race. It ain't none of that. It's, do you know where things need to go and how can we get there? And that's the kind of leadership we need, and that's the questions that need to be asked around leadership. And if you go somewhere else, then you are setting up to be led somewhere else. Because, I mean, look, Adam's as black as I am. That's not that's not how people should decide where they should go. He's blacker than Bob Avakian, but Bob Avakian knows where to go. He has a clear and sharp program on that. He has a plan and a roadmap for carrying out the strategy for revolution. And people need to look at that plan, look at that program, look at that leadership that he's giving, and determine if that's where they think things need to go. And if they need to go there, then people need to be serious enough about it to get up off of other stuff. And like I said, look, I had to get up off it. No, I mean, really, I got out of prison, joined the revolutionary movement, trying to become a revolutionary communist, and had a different approach than Bob Avakian had. I fell into a crib one night where he happened to be staying. He said, "You want to have some conversation about the differences in the revolutionary movement?" And I said, "Sure." And we started arguing because I thought we needed to have a black leader for this new communist movement that we were bringing together, that a revolution had to have black leadership, or maybe we could deal with Puerto Rican leadership. Maybe that's African enough for me. Well, we got into that, and he kept bringing things to where are we trying to go? You know, and I got actually annoyed with that. Oh, why does he keep wanting me to talk about where things need to go? Until I realized, well, we're trying to actually go somewhere. And we need to figure out what it's going to take to get there, including what kind of leadership we need to have. And that's what shook me from that thing. I was like, yeah, you know, you're right. We actually did not get any sleep that night. The sun came up before we got through discussing, and we agreed to come together later and discuss more. And, you know, I ended up in his organization after having argued against him and his organization all night.
So the rest is history.
Well, we are writing history right now. We're still writing it. It is not a finished work.
Making history.
But that's the thing. What's the criteria for leadership? What kind of leadership do we need? And if you're looking at it in terms of I need leadership of this identity or that identity, then you're not serious about getting rid of all this shit. Because you got to say, what is the leadership that can get rid of it? What's the program that can get rid of all this? What's the leadership for that program? What's the work that people have done? What are they saying? What are they doing? And then, and on the defund, abolish, it really does come down to what's the nature of the beast we're dealing with? And is it that there's a problem with policing in this country in and of itself, and that we can solve that problem by getting a different kind of policing going within this system? Or is the policing that you get, is the prisons that you get, and all the other foul institutions that you get determined by the nature of this system, what it operates based on? And that is where that stuff comes from. And that's the deal on it. So you want to talk about defunding the police? You're going to get these capitalist imperialists to defund the frontline enforcers that they have out there enforcing the conditions in this society? No, you ain't. That ain't gonna happen. Now, you can take people off to try to do that, and you will frustrate their activities. You might get flim-flam like people did in Minneapolis, where they got a resolution and then they rescinded the resolution. But you're not going to get these capitalist imperialists to defund their police. You're not going to get them to abolish their police. You know, they might change the name of them or some shit like that, but they are not going to back away from it because they require this police force with these frontline enforcers that do this kind of shit. And if you're serious about stopping the shit that they do, then you got to get to the root of it. Get to the nature of the beast and what it will take to get rid of the beast through an actual revolution. That's the kind of things that, and it's not like we didn't know it. We would have learned some things through going off into the struggle on that basis, but we knew enough to do it. And we just didn't take that approach. It was still more of this fighting the power together with people and off to the side discussing questions of leadership and identity and differences around programs, but not stepping off on that.
Are there other comments or questions? You know, I would, I don't know if we want to draw the discussion to a close, but if we do, there's a difference between drawing the formal discussion to a close and staying here at the store and let's have some informal discussion about, you know, issues that have been raised, you know, further reflections that people have, and how they can connect with this revolution. I mean, I have some more thoughts on all of this, you know, but I just want to give just if there are any last, you know, again, last comments that people have, and then Carl might want to make some closing remarks. But I just wanted to just point one thing out, that these programs of abolitionism, right? These programs of abolitionism abolish the police, abolish the prisons, right? They have a fundamental premise, and it is an illusion. And that fundamental premise is that we should direct the resources of society. You were thinking that, huh, brother? All right. Right, but the fundamental underlying premise, the underpinning of these reformist abolitionist programs, which are very appealing and sound very radical, is that instead of police, why don't we redirect the resources of society to social programs so people don't get into crime? Instead of prisons, why don't we redirect resources to employment programs, to training, to social and psychological healing programs, right? So that people don't wind up in prison, or when they come out of prison, they don't repeat. They don't become repeat offenders. This is the underlying premise of these calls for abolitionism. Instead of this, let's steer the resources here. And this is an illusion, because this is a profit-based economic system, okay? It's a system based on exploitation. And you know what? There is a ruling class in society, a capitalist imperialist class, and they have control over the resources of society. If we could deploy the resources of society for the betterment of people, by just voting, by just pleading, by just presenting a rational case, hey, we'd be in a whole different situation. But these motherfuckers have a violent hold of a society. They control the resources. They have the enforcement mechanisms, the prisons, the police, the court system, the injustice system. And you cannot redirect resources according to a metric, social need and social well-being, which is completely antithetical to how this capitalist imperialist system operates. New York City is the command control headquarters, financial headquarters of the U.S. empire. Now you think these people are going to relinquish control over their police, over their financial institutions, over their power facilities, because it's a more rational and humane thing to do? No! The high point of the civil rights movement 50 years ago, 80% of the largest metropolitan areas in the country today are more segregated in housing than they were a generation ago. The schools in New York City are more segregated. than they were at the high point of the civil rights movement in the 1960s. All of this tells you something. The Black Panthers had food, did breakfast programs. Where's child nutrition at? And they savagely crushed the Black Panther Party. So it's a question of understanding the nature. Carl put it very well, the nature of the beast, right? And you can't, as he said, tame the beast. And here's one of the, and I just thought everybody was a lot of people were speaking to this, that part of preparing people for revolution, winning people to revolution, is helping them understand and struggling with them to understand that you cannot reform this system in the interest of humanity. You cannot make this system redirect resources in such a way that humanity will benefit and thrive. And you know what? Illusions die hard. Reformist programs with a radical veneer like abolitionism, they grow up, right? They pop up repeatedly because this is all part of accepting the framework of the system as the system and not coming to terms with and grips with the reality, the nature of the beast, as Carl was saying. And that is, that is an inconvenient truth. That gets you out of your comfort zone. It is not easy to come to grips with that, but you have to, and it's very liberatory. Very liberatory. And that's why we're talking about hope on a scientific basis. So I just wanted to kind of close out on, this, kind of getting at the, sort of getting at the fundamentals of this reformist approach. You see what I'm saying? And we can talk more about it because we get into it all the time here at Revolution Books, right? We have, we're going to have more programs on this. So I do want to, invite people to stay behind. Let's, talk among ourselves. And I'm sure we have more questions. And Carl is going to be available to interact with. And there are the books, and there's, once again, Tatu and Brenda. Right? It wasn't that I forgot your name. My mind was wandering. But they're here because we are enlisting you to become part of the life of this bookstore and the programs that are coming up. And I think maybe we can call it an evening. I want to thank Carl for an incredible talk.
Yeah, we can wind up on that because I was going to talk about go back to the nature of the beast.
Yeah, me too.
But you actually did it, so let's wind up the formal part of the program here, and you don't have to go home. Let's hang around for informal conversation.
All right.